To interrupt you right now.
Sorry.
Richard Hack, thank you very much. We appreciate the book is called Hughes. We want to go live right now and show you a picture of the World Trade Center where I understand, do we have it? No, we do not. We have a breaking story, though. We're going to come back with that in just a moment. First, this is Today on NBC.
Mentioned we have a breaking news story to tell you about. Apparently, a plane has just crashed into the World Trade Center here in New York City. It happened just a few moments ago, apparently. We have very little information available at this point in time, but on the phone we do have Jennifer Oberstein, who apparently witnessed this event. Jennifer, can you hear me?
Hello?
Hi, Jennifer.
Hi, Katie.
Hi, can you please tell me what you saw and to give me any information about what's going on there?
Yes, I have to tell you, it's quite terrifying. I'm in shock right now. I came out of the subway at Bowling Green. I was heading to work in Battery Park at the Ritz-Carlton Hotel, and I come out, and I heard a boom, looked up, and there was a big ball of fire. I'm now looking north at the World Trade Center, and it is the left twin tower if I'm looking north. I'm in Battery Park right now, and you can hear the fire engines and the emergency crews behind me, and it is unbelievable. When the fire first burst, it was a... Hello?
Go ahead. We can hear you.
In air like I've never seen before. And as you know, I used to work in news. I've never seen any fire like this in the air. And pieces of the building were flying down. It looks like it's like the top, I can't even tell you, maybe 20 floors. Intense smoke. It's horrible. I can't even describe it to you.
Do you have any idea what kind of plane it was?
I'm sorry?
Do you have any idea what hit the World Trade Center?
What it was?
Yeah, what kind of plane? We're getting reports that an airplane hit the building.
Oh, I didn't even know that. Honestly, I was walking up, and it looked up and saw a big boom and fire. You know, I got to tell you, we were all saying around here that it was very interesting that it would be a bomb and it would be so high up. So perhaps it was a plane. We have no talk of a plane. However, I have to tell you, there are still things flying in the air. I mean, it's mind-boggling, and it's horrifying.
Jennifer, it's Matt Lauer. I'd like to ask you, while you were close to the building, or have you, since the explosion, seen anyone who's been injured being taken out of the building? Are there ambulances dealing with people on the sidewalk around the building? No,
I have not. I have not gotten that close. I have to tell you that my father works in the World Financial Center, and I first called over there to see, because it's next door, to see, you know, if he was okay. I couldn't get through, and I'm far away right now. I thought it might be a little dangerous to get too close. I saw lots of debris coming down, and right now I'm in Battery Park. I don't know, you know, it's probably a 5-minute walk from here to the World Trade Center. But the smoke is incredible. I mean, I can't see the top of the tower. It's starting to cover the top of the second tower.
In fact, we're looking at pictures right now, Jennifer, with a huge gaping hole on the side of the building and billowing smoke. So
I'm right now, you see, yeah, I see major fire. I definitely see fire.
And Jennifer, you said you're looking north at the building, so in other words, you're south of the building,
yes,
is that right?
Correct.
Because we're looking at a picture that is looking at the north side of the building.
I'm on the exact opposite side.
And it appears that is where the largest hole is, and again, as you mentioned correctly, toward the top of the building, but on the north side, and then on the, what I think is the west side of the building, we can also see some holes there that could have been from damage once the impact occurred. Again, we've been told that this is a plane. We don't have confirmation on that, but there is an enormous hole in the north side of that building.
Jennifer, can you tell us a little bit more about what you heard when you heard this explosion? Describe it for us.
Absolutely. When I walked out of the subway, I looked at the Twin Towers because, I mean, I just always look up there. And right when I looked up, there was a boom. It wasn't that loud. Like, it wasn't huge. However, what was unbelievable was the amount of fire. It was a big ball of fire that just went up. And I looked around at people. We were all horrified. I'm stuttering because I'm in such shock. I've never seen anything like it. It's just horrible.
And of course, this is real cause for concern because the World Trade Center is one of the busiest office buildings here in New York with hundreds, perhaps thousands of workers
New
who...
York State Governor has his office,
Oh,
New York
that's right.
City office there.
Several thousand
and of
workers.
course, given the time that this has happened, it's only probably appropriate to surmise that people might have been in the building.
And you know, we've seen stories in the past where planes have hit buildings, small planes, and it would be hard to imagine that a small plane could create that kind of hole in a building like the World Trade Center and create the damage on the other side of the building from the sheer impact. Small planes tend to crumple and then fall down the building. Again, we haven't talked to anyone who's close to the base of the building, so we don't know what kind of debris or wreckage. Yes, go ahead, Jennifer.
I'm sorry, I'm just talking to a police officer right here, and he says yes, he heard it was a plane.
Does he have any information about what kind of plane it was, or can he tell us any more details?
May I, I'm going to put you on hold for one moment, okay?
Just to recap, if you're just joining us, you're looking at dramatic pictures of New York's World Trade Center in Lower Manhattan, where a short time ago we are told that a plane crashed into the upper floors of the westernmost tower. You can see a gaping hole. That is on the north side of the building, and you can see residual damage on the west side of that building, and obviously fires are burning right now in the World Trade Center.
Tall buildings have had a real problem here in New York. There was, back in the 40s, a plane hit the Empire State Building. In the 60s, a helicopter crashed on the top of what was the Pan Am Building, now the MetLife Building. So
Right now we're getting information, Al, that it was a small commuter plane, and of course we'll let people know as soon as we have more information as to what actually caused this, and of course on everybody's mind who might have been hurt as a result of this terrible, terrible incident. We're going to be talking to more eyewitnesses coming up in just a few minutes.
We are back at 9 o'clock Eastern time on this Tuesday morning, and we're back with dramatic pictures of an accident that has happened just a short time ago. You're looking at the World Trade Center in Lower Manhattan, where just a few minutes ago we're told that a plane, some reports are that it was a small commuter plane, crashed into the upper floors of one of the twin towers. You can see fire and flames or smoke billowing from that tower. There is a gaping hole on the north side of the building. That's the side you're seeing to the left-hand side of your screen right now, and other damage to the west side of that building, which is to the right side of your screen. This, of course, happened just before the morning commute, before people were heading into their offices, and while I'm sure some people were already at work, immediately there's speculation or cause for concern. This is the World Trade Center that was the center of a terrorist bombing some years ago. So the questions have to be asked, was this purely an accident, or could this have been an intentional act? But either way, extensive damage has been done to this building.
it also looks like there's smoke coming out of the east side of the building. That shot we just saw looks like white smoke billowing out the side of the east side of the building.
Obviously, horrified commuters were absolutely devastated when they heard this explosion. We talked with somebody a moment ago about that, Jennifer Oberstein, and also another eyewitness, Elliot Walker, who is actually a producer here on the Today Show. Elliot, can you hear me?
Yes, hi, Katie.
Hi, Elliot. Tell me where you are and what you saw.
Well, I live in this area. I've returned to my apartment, but I was walking down the sidewalk delivering my young daughter to school, and we heard a very loud sound, the kind of sound you hear when a plane is going fast past you, followed by an enormous crash and an immediate explosion. I don't think we could feel shock waves, but we sort of felt like we did. And we were in a position where we could see the Trade Center almost immediately between the other buildings. And an enormous fireball that must have been 300 feet across was visible immediately. A secondary explosion, I think, and then plumes of smoke. There must have been a 3-block cloud of white smoke. Now, from where I was on the street a moment ago, you can in fact see smoke leaving the building on 3 sides. It seems to be coming out on at least 4 or 5 floors. The air is filled with hundreds of thousands of pieces of paper that are just sort of floating like confetti. The area is swarmed with emergency vehicles and sirens. Obviously, we're very sensitive to this kind of thing in this neighborhood.
Elliot, have you, of course, because of the incident that occurred in the early 1990s, have you seen any evidence, Elliot, of people being taken out of the building? You say that emergency vehicles are there, understandably so, but of course the major concern is human loss. I mean, do you know if there were many people in the building?
Another one just hit. Something else just hit. A very large plane just flew directly over my building, and there's been another collision. Can you see it? I can see it on the shot.
Oh my!
Something else has
You know what? We just saw a plane circling the building.
It is in the other building.
We just saw a plane circling the building a second ago on the shot right before that.
I think there may have been another impact. Can you tell? I just heard another very loud bang, and a very large plane that might have been a DC-9 or a 747 just flew past my window, and I think it may have hit the Trade Center again.
To be honest, Elliot, I didn't get the impression that it was that big a plane.
It looks big from here.
I did see a plane go by a second ago, though, and it has now impacted the building. I'm trying to see if it's the different tower.
I think it may have been. I believe
tower.
the first one was World Trade Center 1, and it looks, from what I'm seeing on the television, like it may have been the second building that was hit.
This is a piece of tape, and we may actually see another plane enter the picture here in a second.
I wonder if there are air traffic control problems.
Let's go back to Jennifer Oberstein, who was talking to a second ago. Jennifer, did you see this happen?
Hello?
Did you just see this happen, Jennifer?
Matt, I've never seen any. It looks like a movie. I saw a large plane, like a jet, go immediately headed directly into the World Trade Center. It just flew into it, into the other tower, coming from south to north. I watched the plane fly into the World Trade Center. It was a jet. It was a very large plane. It was going fast. It went past the Ritz-Carlton Hotel that's being built in Battery Park. It flew right past it, almost hit it, and then went in.
This is so shocking, of course, to everybody watching.
I've never seen anything like it. It literally flew itself into World Trade Center.
Obviously now we move from what appears to have, there it is right there.
Again, I'm looking from south to north, and it went into the one on the right.
That appeared to be at least a 727. We saw it a second ago. Here comes the videotape that we just showed you. You will see what appears to be a large plane. It could be a 727 right there, maybe even bigger, flying right into the side of the World Trade Center.
It was at least a 727. It was a jet. I couldn't believe my eyes watching it right above me.
And now you have to move from talk about a possible accident to talk about something deliberate that has happened here. We're going to immediately check with air traffic control in the area to find out if they had contact with either of these planes before the accident, but what we've just seen is about the most shocking videotape I've ever seen.
What are the odds of two separate planes hitting both towers?
Elliot, are you still there?
Hello?
Elliot?
Yes, I'm still here, Katie.
So, Elliot, what can you see right now from your perspective?
I don't face in that direction. I can't see anything personally.
It is completely impossible to understand why this is happening and to figure out what in the world is going on.
I think we have to be grateful
Ali
that the first
Eberhard
plane hit before 9 a.m., but it's now after 9 a.m., and I just wonder how many people were in those offices.
Well, hopefully that they were evacuated following the first incident, and we can only hope that there was a very short period of time from when we first learned about this was probably about 8:50 Eastern time. This second incident occurred about 9:05. And so obviously that would be a short amount of time to get people out of the building. Ali Eberhard is another witness who is on the ground. Ali, can you hear me?
Yes, hello.
Please tell me what you're seeing.
Well, I live in Lower Manhattan. I face the north tower, the north side where the first plane crashed into the building. And right now, there's a lot of chaos on the ground, a lot of emergency vehicles. Everyone from the World Financial Center has exited and is walking north up to Battery Park North. There's just mass and mass of people walking north uptown of Manhattan. I happened to look on the first tower, and I actually saw people waving where the first plane crashed through, and then it was unbelievable seeing this second jet come crashing into the second tower. What is going on?
And unfortunately, here in New York, many of our stations cannot see this, local stations, because the antennas are on the World Trade Center. They're backup towers on the Empire State Building, but television communication in New York City is probably pretty much knocked off the air.
I just want to say something. We're looking at a picture here where it appears, because of the angle, I think, that the towers are leaning, and I don't think that is actually the case, because after the first impact, it looked as if it was the right-hand tower was leaning. And now somebody is saying, we're getting a witness saying they are leaning actually right now, which will give you an idea of the type of impact we're talking about.
And that perhaps they're buckling under the force of the collision or the hole that's resulted from these two planes.
We're going to go to George Shea right now, who has also witnessed both or one of these collisions. George, can you hear us?
I can hear you.
What did you see, George?
Yeah, well, I was in a car driving up, just gotten out of the Battery Tunnel, driving north on West Street when an enormous explosion happened. And it was larger than a construction explosion. I looked out the window, and what appeared to be an enormous tire smashed into the ground, and I believe it hit the car to the right of me. And it was just so scary, and there was also a ton of debris fall. And I jumped out of the car and I ran south away from the building because I thought there would be further explosions.
And have you seen anyone injured on the ground, George?
A man next to me was actually hit by a piece of debris in his arm, and they said that someone had been badly hurt in a car ahead of me. I'm not certain if it was the car next to me, and I can't verify that. All I can say is that a lot of debris was falling. It was very confusing because everybody, I think, immediately assumed that a bomb had exploded, and that sort of had people thinking that further bombs may explode. So there was sort of a rush away.
Did you see, George, the second plane, that jet, fly into the other twin tower?
I heard two explosions, however. There was a first explosion that was louder, and then a second explosion, and but I could not see that, and I looked up, and when I looked up, I saw debris falling, and the tire, as I said, a very large tire.
Well, of course, this is, as we've said, completely shocking video and a shocking turn of events, and we've been talking here that the first incident, one might surmise that it was some kind of accident, and then to have a second, what appeared to be 727 jet, of course, the question of terrorist activity has to surface, and the question of whether this was an intentional terrorist act of some kind.
You know, keep in mind that we're in an area here where there are three major airports. You have Newark Airport, Kennedy Airport, and LaGuardia Airport, all within several miles of the World Trade Center. You know, it's very unusual for a plane to get into this area without being completely tracked or identified by air traffic control. So you would have to imagine that, A, if this plane were headed right for the World Trade Center, there must have been someone trying to talk or communicate with that pilot, and for it to fly right into the side of the building.
Well, the smaller plane you can understand almost, but a jumbo jet, a large jet, completely.
Let's re-rack that video, if we could, down in the control room where we actually saw the jet flying into the building,
and
which
I was mistaken.
Unbelievable.
And Elliot Walker said it was a big plane. I was looking in the distance and saw a small plane, which might have been a helicopter, actually. To see this plane come into the picture,
there it is.
That is a big plane. And I mean, it's hard to imagine. It's a 737, we're now being told, and flying directly into the midsection of what would be the eastern tower of the World Trade Center.
I'm wondering if Jennifer Oberstein is still on the phone. Do we still have Jennifer on the phone? She's actually not on the phone because she was near a police officer. At least we could have perhaps gotten more information from that officer. Needless to say, it's pandemonium, I am sure, down there, and we gathered that from even the eyewitnesses with whom we spoke, and how terrifying this was for them to see. And you can only imagine, as you get closer to the Twin Towers, a New York landmark, what the scene must be like there.
You know, you talked about the buildings looking like they're buckled. They're designed to have a 2-degree sway in either direction because of the height of the building and to be able to deal with wind and stress, but something like that is more than it's probably designed for.
We want to go now out to Jane Daranowski, who I understand is a television producer here in New York. Jane, can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you. I'm down here near the World Trade Center. I was walking down 6th Avenue this morning at 8:42 a.m. A group of us saw a plane veer through the buildings. Then we saw a huge cloud of smoke, and then fire came out of one of the towers. Here it's near the upper floor, as you can probably see with your chopper shots. And then about 10 minutes ago, a second explosion in the second tower. Lower down, that was not affected by the plane, so I'm not quite sure what happened there. but right now there's a huge gaping hole in one of the towers, and the other building is on fire. The scene down here is incredible. People are out of their office buildings, watching, crying, taking pictures. I've never seen anything like it down here.
Jane, you said you saw the first plane. Did you get a glimpse of what kind of plane that was? We were told it was a small commuter plane.
Well, it wasn't a Cessna or anything like that. It was a larger plane, a mid-sized plane, and we could hear it very low. And walking down the street, a couple of us looked at each other, thinking, what's happening? Then it veered drastically on its side through the buildings and then went into the upper floors of the World Trade Center tower.
And we want to just mention that when the impact hit the first tower, you would hope that people who were in the second tower were beginning to evacuate, especially if air traffic control had some indication that this was deliberate. You'd hope that they were starting to get people out of the other tower before this second plane hit that tower.
But if you've tried to go up, we've been upstairs in the towers of the restaurant up there to try to get down.
I mean, the elevators would have been jammed, no question, but if there was an indication that this was deliberate in the first case, you'd hope that they would immediately begin evacuation in the second tower.
We've got another eyewitness that we'd like to speak with. Dan Dietrich is on the phone. Dan, tell me where you are and what you're seeing or what you saw.
Okay, what I saw was one plane coming in low from the north down over 7th Avenue. It crashed into the top or the middle of one of the towers. 10 minutes later, I saw another plane crash into the other side of the tower at a lower level. It looked to me a small, commercial plane, the first plane that I saw. It crashed into the top of the tower, and there was a huge fireball, and there was a gaping hole in the side of the tower. As we were waiting outside and looking at it, another plane came in low, I believe from the other side, and hit the middle of the other tower. So I saw both planes, two separate planes, crash into each tower.
And Dan, and again, the size of the planes, tell me about that.
I would say that the plane was a mid-size, looked to be a commercial airline. I don't know. I thought perhaps, a commercial airline, a mid-size, not a jumbo jet.
This, of course, is unconfirmed, but we are getting information from an employee of United Airlines. And again, we want to emphasize this is unconfirmed, but there is speculation that an American Airlines plane was hijacked and crashed on purpose into the World Trade Center, and that the second plane was another plane, perhaps hijacked, was then flown in to the second tower. Dan, tell me about people on the ground. Are you at a vantage point where you can see what's happening on the ground?
I'm farther up in the West Village. I'm not on the ground near the base of the towers.
Where were you when it actually happened?
I was walking down 7th Avenue south at about Charles Street, which is about 15 or 20 blocks north of the towers.
Well, obviously, this was a shocking thing for you to witness on this Tuesday morning, where some wires just came out and said in 1945, an Army Air Corps B-25, a twin-engine bomber, crashed into the 79th floor of the Empire State Building. That occurred in dense fog. This was a crystal clear day in Manhattan. So it is completely unclear how there would be any kind of problems with visibility. Dan, thank you so much for talking with us. Hopefully you can stay on the phone and we can check back in with you at another point in time. We really appreciate it.
You're welcome.
We want to also remind people that the World Trade Center bombing that took place on February 26th back in 1993, the product of a terrorist attack, the result of a terrorist attack that killed 6 people and injured more than 1,000. Of course, that happened on a Friday afternoon. I think, Matt, you and Al were working that day.
We were.
I know I was at home in Virginia watching it in disbelief, and now it feels a bit like deja vu. But of course, this is so much more bizarre.
Yeah,
grander
No question,
scale.
and you keep in mind that that killed 6 people, injured 1,000, and the explosion happened in a garage in the basement. This was a direct hit on the midsection or upper section of the tower, so the potential for injuries and death much larger. Of course, also some people on the planes.
Yeah,
That's
were there
right,
people on the
exactly. If there were hijacked and they were en route to a different destination,
Right.
of course, this story continues to unfold. Bob Kerr joins us now. Bob, where are you and what can you tell us?
Katie, good morning. I'm on the north lawn at the White House, and the first thing we looked for here in light of what's happened is whether there is any unusual activity out here, whether there's an unusual police or Secret Service presence, people on the roof, that sort of thing. We don't see that as we speak. I did try to call the National Security Office here. As you know, the president is out of town. He is in Florida. We're told he has been informed of this. I can tell you that the White House National Security staff that remains here is in a senior level meeting, and we're hoping to hear from them as soon as possible. But Katie, the reaction here to the pictures you're seeing and to the initial pictures when they came up, even in what's called the lower press office here at the White House, was one of shock. I mean, people are just standing around television monitors looking at this. And when I say people, I don't mean just the reporters. I mean the people who are actually in the office who work here at the White House.
So very little information is coming out of the White House at this juncture, but needless to say, if the speculation is true about some kind of terrorist event, this will be a major, major crisis for the Bush administration. Jim Miklashevsky is at the Pentagon now. Mick, are you hearing any more information from there?
Well, according to U.S. intelligence officials, Katie, there appeared, at least to their knowledge, to be no specific threat involving hijacking airliners or any attacks on buildings in the New York area. U.S. intelligence officials report this morning that there are, they constantly are hearing about threats, possible terrorist threats against American targets worldwide. But as far as they know this morning, they had no early indications that anything of this nature could have occurred. Pentagon officials are already calling this a terrorist attack. They say that they have not yet ordered the scrambling of any military jets. If National Guard were to be scrambled in that area, that would be at the order of the governor. Now, of course, the president does have the authority to scramble American military forces in defense, but there's a problem here. What now do you defend against exactly? If you put warplanes in the air, there's always a danger that they could misidentify a pilot's intention. Although I believe, according to officials here,
I just wanted to tell you guys, if you want to continue,
are now off limits and restricted. But so far, the U.S. military and Pentagon officials are scrambling to get as much information as they possibly can to determine what course of action, if any, the U.S. military would take.
But Mick, they are describing this as a terrorist attack right now.
There are some officials here in the Pentagon who are calling this an obvious terrorist attack based on very preliminary information. The information that intelligence officials are getting in terms of a possible hijacked plane, and of course the very horrifying video of the plane veering into the tower itself is a clear indication to everyone here that this is not an accident.
All right, Jim Miklashevsky, thanks. And of course, the coordination that took place to have 2 planes hit the towers within 18 minutes of one another. Let's go back to the White House now. Bob Kerr is still standing by there. Bob, what can you tell us?
Well, Matt, it was interesting to listen to Jim Miklashevsky there from the Pentagon. Of course, the president has the authority to scramble military forces, and this is a case, obviously, in which retaliation, if indeed it proves to be a terrorist incident, will be contemplated. But the usual course of events is it's an investigation. You know, unless someone steps forward, claims responsibility, the White House and other arms of the U.S. government will say, we have to determine who is responsible for this attack, try to pinpoint it, and then the U.S. usually says someone is going to be made to pay. But that is a big if we can determine exactly the origin of this terrorist attack. And so there are some implications to that.
Let's go back to Jim Glashevsky. Bob, thank you, at the Pentagon. Mick, you have more information?
Well, Katie, Bob's exactly right, but what the primary concern right now is protecting the American public in the New York area right now against any possible further attacks by the air. They have no indications there will be, but there is some concern that since this appeared to be such a highly coordinated attack, that there may be other terrorist attacks that could be planned either in New York or elsewhere. This is absolutely the worst case scenario for the counterterrorist planners because apparently, according to intelligence officials, there were no firm indications prior to this that anything like this could have happened. But in terms of scrambling the U.S. military, it would be for protection for the time being and not necessarily even thinking right now about any kind of retaliation.
All right, David Gregory is now on the phone from Longboat Key, actually, where
he's following the president.
That's right. David?
Yes, Katie, the president is about to begin an education event, which is obviously being canceled. The event will go forward insofar as the president, we expect momentarily, will come out and make a statement about this. He was made aware en route from his hotel to this school here in Sarasota where he was going to talk about education. He'll make a statement, then we're told by White House officials that he will quickly depart for Washington.
We should mention, David, that New York City Airport or New York area airports have all been closed. The Lincoln Tunnel has been closed here in New York. While we're getting ready to listen to the president, let's go back to Jim Glashevsky at the Pentagon. Jim, you talk about counter-terrorist measures that are in place. Can you shed any light for us on what kind of things are in place in the event of an attack of this nature?
Well, Katie, it's very difficult for the U.S. military to respond to this kind of thing right now because it's unclear exactly who's behind it and if there are any other potential attacks or incidents like this, because this has obviously not been officially declared a terrorist attack. But all the experts who are looking at these pictures say there's no doubt about it. This was a coordinated terrorist attack. But who and why is very much unclear right now. And the problem with trying to then put planes in the air to try to prevent any further attacks is these are, after all, open airspaces for the most part. And it's difficult for the U.S. military to simply scramble jets and put them in the air. And then, according to officials here, then do what? This area, of course, according to officials here, is obviously going to be declared off limits in terms of any air traffic. But right now, officials here at the Pentagon are simply scrambling to find out first what happened and what potential reaction the U.S. military could provide in terms of protection. Possible further protection against any further potential attacks.
And Mick, it's important to note that if these planes were hijacked, if they were carrying passengers, there isn't much that military officials could have done. You can't shoot down a plane like that for risk of the people on board, plus for the injuries you could cause on the ground in a place like Manhattan. Go ahead.
That's exactly right. And the president, as we said earlier, does in fact have the authority to scramble the military to put them up in some kind of force protection mode. The governor has the Air National Guard at his disposal. He can do that. But again, officials are pretty much wondering exactly what to do in terms of protection and how. Again, to the terrorist officials, this is absolutely the worst case scenario because there right now seems to be not much they can do in terms of the aftermath.
Mick, obviously, yeah, we're scrambling for information here. I would just want to read this Reuters wire that says 2 planes crashed into the towers of the World Trade Center on Tuesday morning, causing huge explosions and killing at least 6 people. CNBC TV said there were at least 1,000 injured. Both towers of the Lower Manhattan landmark, where thousands of people work, were the scenes of a bombing in 1993. The FBI told the Associated Press that it was, quote, foul play and not an accident. A person who answered the phone, that was reported by ABC, a person who answered the phone on the trading floor at interdealer broker Cantor Fitzgerald, located near the top of the World Trade Center, said, were blanking dying when asked what was happening and hung up. There was screaming and yelling in the background, and a follow-up call was not answered. Nick Fulton, an eyewitness, said just before the first explosion he saw a plane fly over his apartment in the Soho district of Lower Manhattan. Jamie Gangel is on the telephone, our national correspondent, with more information. Jamie, what can you tell us?
Katie, I've just spoken to top U.S. officials with the access to latest intelligence, and they said, quote, that this was clearly terrorist-related, no question about it. They said that they couldn't give any further details now, not because they didn't want to share it, but because they just don't know yet. They're at the earliest stages.
So do they know, Jamie, for example, if a plane was in fact hijacked?
They would not answer that, and I think that it's because they just are getting the earliest details and they're afraid of putting out misinformation. But they said, that it was clearly terrorist-related.
All right, Jamie, thanks. We're looking again, if you're just joining us, at both towers of the World Trade Center in New York City, where two planes have crashed into the towers, one shortly before 9 o'clock Eastern Time, one shortly after 9 o'clock Eastern Time. And as you can see, the tower on the left was hit just above the midsection point. They're both 110 floors high, 1,300 feet above the ground. The tower on the right was hit more, probably 2/3 to 3/4 of the way up the tower, but you can see fires burning in both towers. We actually saw a videotape. We watched the second tape, or the second plane hit the building. You'll watch it enter from the right portion of the screen and then make contact with the left-hand tower in what is shocking video. And here it comes right there. And you can see the impact on one side of the building and the residual damage coming out of another side of the building. And one can only imagine that one occurred shortly after 9 o'clock in the morning. How many people were in the building at the time of the impact? And it's a large plane. We're told it was either a 737. Some reports that the first plane was a 757.
Some kind of Airbus. That was what the United worker told us. That apparently that it was an American Airlines plane that had been hijacked from Boston to Los Angeles, but we're just getting initial reports of that. And again, we must tell you that we're trying to get as much information, but it is trickling in at a very slow pace. So all of this is unconfirmed, and of course speculation of a terrorist attack is unconfirmed, although that is what some Pentagon officials are saying. Let's go to President Bush right now.
Unfortunately, we'll be going back to Washington after my remarks. Secretary Rod Page and Lieutenant Governor will take the podium and discuss education. I do want to thank the folks here at Booker Elementary School for their hospitality. Today, we've had a national tragedy. Two airplanes have crashed into the World Trade Center in an apparent terrorist attack on our country. I have spoken to the Vice President, to the Governor of New York, to the Director of the FBI, and have ordered that the full resources of the federal government go to help the victims and their families, and to conduct a full-scale investigation to hunt down and to find those folks who committed this act. Terrorism against our nation will not stand. And now, if you join me in a moment of silence. May God bless the victims, their families, and America. Thank you very much.
No. That, of course, was President Bush, who is in Florida, in Longboat Key. He was speaking at an elementary school. He had planned to be talking about literacy. Obviously, he had to change. He mentioned that this is an apparent terrorist attack. He is traveling back to Washington. He said that he had spoken to the governor of New York as well as the vice president, that all the resources will be brought to bear by the federal government to determine who did this and who was responsible for this terrible, terrible event. And then, of course, it was followed by a moment of silence for the victims.
We're going to go to Andrea Mitchell now, who has more information on this tragedy. Andrea?
Matt and Katie, I've spoken to a top U.S. official who says that early reports to our intelligence community and to other officials within the administration are that this was a hijacked American Airlines plane en route from Boston to Los Angeles. One of the two planes, they say, was apparently a hijacked American Airlines plane. They caution that early reports still need further confirmation, but this is at least what the U.S.'s government is being told by American Airlines officials, apparently. They are assuming and have obviously informed the president that this is a terror attack.
And Andrea, we have no information as to in what term of the flight this plane was taken over, how much warning that air traffic controllers may have had that someone hostile was at the controls of this plane?
Exactly right. They had no other information, just that at least one of the two planes was hijacked from Boston en route to Los Angeles, presumably after it had already been in the air and en route, because I was told en route to Los Angeles. So probably hijacked after it had taken off. As you know, those are very short flights. Those are usually 737s or 757s on that route. But this clearly, according to the U.S. government, is a terror attack, as you heard the president say. Now, one of the things, Matt and Katie, we should understand is that there was no specific threat that the U.S. government is aware of. No specific terror alert other than the worldwide caution that had been reissued in recent days because of the strife in the Middle East, because of concerns over terrorists. Of course, the best known is Osama bin Laden, but no alert coming from his organization. And as far as they know, as of this morning, as of this minute, he is in Afghanistan.
But as we should mention, Andrea, it appears that this was a well-coordinated bombing or terrorist act because of the fact that two planes were used, both substantial in size, and the fact that they both hit the World Trade Center within 18 minutes of one another. Obviously, a lot of planning went into this attack. Let's go to NBC's Jim Miklaszewski at the Pentagon now. Mick, what can you tell us?
Matt, to add to what Andrea Mitchell just said, senior military officials here at the Pentagon are saying they are getting information that the American Airlines Flight 11, after it left Boston apparently, was hijacked and was diverted, apparently the early information was being diverted to JFK for some reason. And then, obviously, nobody knows exactly who was at the controls of the plane, but it broke off its route from to Los Angeles and was headed toward JFK. That was the initial information that officials had received when obviously it did not go to JFK, but veered off and headed toward the World Trade Center. But again, no indication as to who may be responsible or who was at the controls of that plane when it rammed into the World Trade Center. Matt.
Mick, thank you. We're going to be obviously talking with you throughout the morning, but right now we want to talk with Larry Johnson, a terrorism expert, in fact, the former Deputy Director of the State Department's Office on Counterterrorism. Mr. Johnson, can you please put this into some kind of perspective for us and give us your insight on what might have happened here?
Well, first we need to be cautious before jumping to the conclusion that it's necessarily terrorism. I mean, I would be inclined, based upon the preliminary reports we've seen, to say that that's the case. But there's always the possibility that you may find out after the fact that this was some suicide pact for some reason that had nothing to do with politics. That said, this is a first. Back in 1992, there was 93, there was a Lufthansa plane hijacked from Germany, and it ended up landing in New York. And one of the concerns we had at that time was the possibility of that plane, under the control of a hijacker, flying it into one of the buildings. My concern now is that there's always we ignore terrorism. We talk a lot about it, but we ignore taking very practical steps on security fronts until something like this happens, and then the pendulum swings out to an extreme. The next thing you hear are people talking about putting surface-to-air missiles on top of buildings to prevent this kind of thing. This is a very rare event. It's unlikely to be repeated, but, and I think President Bush put his finger on it, we have to find who did this, and any country, any nation in the world that is in any way involved and responsible, if it turns out to be terrorism, will require a response from the United States, and the United States has got to be willing to pay that price.
Mr. Johnson, obviously we're completely stunned when about 25 minutes after the first explosion, or after the first plane crashed into one of the Twin Towers, another very large plane did the same thing. Right. And we've been talking with our correspondents all morning about sort of if another incident could happen on the heels of these two. What kind of measures are in place to prepare for something else that could conceivably happen?
Well, I think one of those steps is already being taken. I was at National Airport getting ready to fly to LaGuardia when this occurred. They have shut down air traffic going in and out of the cities. Now, apart from shutting down the air traffic, you're talking about an enormous disruption economically for the nation right now with the air traffic not going in, and people are they're gonna err on the side of caution. I think across the board you're going to look at the major hubs in the United States where there are large buildings, Chicago, Atlanta, Los Angeles, and there are going to be extra measures taken. One possibility is you could start putting up air cover and require that planes stay within a particular area and do not approach any closer. And if they approach, you would go to the extremes of having the U.S. Air Force intercept.
Larry, I wanted to ask you, all morning that correspondents have also been saying, particularly Bob Kerr and Jim Miklashevsky, that there was and Andrea Mitchell, no warning attached to this event. Right. Generally speaking, do we get some kind of, do U.S. officials, government agencies get some kind of warning from a particular group, or is this fairly typical in terms of an event happening without any foreshadowing?
No, Katie, this unfortunately is typical. It's only in the movies that you get the advanced warnings. You look at every major terrorist incident against the United States, whether you're talking Pan Am 103, the World Trade Center, the USS Cole bombing, the bombing in Dhahran, Saudi Arabia. Okay. Rarely do you get an advance notice.
Larry, I'm sorry to interrupt you, but Jim Miklashevsky has some new information at the Pentagon. I hope you'll stand by and continue to talk with us. Mick?
Katie, I don't want to alarm anybody right now, but apparently it felt just a few moments ago like there was an explosion of some kind here at the Pentagon. We're on the E-ring of the Pentagon. We have a window that faces out toward the Potomac, toward the Kennedy Center. We haven't been able to see or hear anything after the initial blast. I just stepped out in the hallway. Security guards were herding people out of the building, and I saw just a moment ago as I looked outside, a number of construction workers who have been working here have taken flight. They're running as far away from the building as they can right now. I hear no sirens going off in the building. I see no smoke, but the building shook for just a couple of seconds. The windows rattled, and security personnel are doing what they can momentarily to clear this part of the building. Again, I have no idea whether it was part of the construction work, whether it was an accident, or what is going on. We're going to try to find those details and get them to you as soon as possible. But interestingly enough, one intelligence official here in the building said when he saw what appeared to be the coordinated attack on the World Trade Center, his advice was to stay away from the outside of the building today, just in case. Now, again, nobody has any indications of exactly what happened, but it appears that there has been some kind of, it felt like a small blast of some kind. Again, the windows shook, the building shook, the windows rattled, and people, if I'm looking out the window now, and the construction workers are still keeping a good, the construction workers are still keeping a distance. That's all I can see. And I see no other extracurricular security activity right outside. But to get more information, I'm going to have to break away and walk down the hallway and see what it is exactly that happened here just a few moments ago.
Mick, see what you can find out. Please be careful and let us know what's going on there. Meanwhile, we're going to go back to David Gregory, who is in Longboat Key, Florida, where President Bush was earlier this morning for an event on literacy. He was going to a school to talk with kids. David, what can you tell us?
A little bit more about how all of this unfolded and what the president is going to do next. The president declared this an apparent terrorist act. He offered a prayer for the families, promised to hunt down, in his words, the people responsible for this. He will now travel back to Washington, and aides are telling us now that he will immediately convene a national security meeting to see what steps are taken next.
David, I'm sorry to interrupt you, but we're looking at live pictures of the Pentagon where there is billowing smoke. Jim Miklashevsky just reported that he heard an explosion, and right now we're looking at an aerial view of the Pentagon. Mick, can you talk to us?
Officially, nobody knows exactly what happened. I think the picture is pretty clear. According to one U.S. Army officer who went running past me at a full trot, he said that it appears that a bomb was detonated at the heliport. The heliport is a helicopter landing area right next to the Pentagon, just adjacent to the E-ring. The offices nearest the heliport area are U.S. Army, Reserve officers, and the Army Reserve our offices are located there. But as you can see, it appears to be a pretty significant blast. To give you some perspective, we are almost on the opposite side of the building, the world's largest office building. And as I reported to you, we could feel the building shake and the windows rattle. And as I was in the hallway just a few moments ago, I could smell an acrid kind of smoke, the kind of almost what you'd smell when a fluorescent light goes bad, that kind of ballast smell. And authorities are clearing the building. I don't know if you can hear the sirens outside right now, but it appears that in what I think people here in the building are already describing as a highly sophisticated, coordinated attack, not only against the World Trade Center, but against the Pentagon and U.S. military right here in Washington.
Tell me again, I worked at the Pentagon as well, and it is a huge building. I mean, it's miles and miles of offices. At what location did this seem to have detonated? It's at the
heliport. The heliport, which is as you sit in the Pentagon, you have the Potomac River and Washington, D.C. on one side, and the heliport is located almost exactly on the opposite side of the building, along one of the highways. Easily accessible, even though that they've increased security here significantly at the Pentagon within the past couple of years. That area...
I want to mention to you, Mick, that we are hearing, again, unconfirmed reports that this was the result of a plane crashing in the area as well.
I have no idea, Katie. All I know is that people who were in the building who came running from that part of the building thought it was a bomb of some kind. According to Chris Brown, my colleague who just came in, it appears that whatever it was, and perhaps it was a plane, Katie, if those are the initial reports, crashed into, or the damage is on the roof of the building at the heliport side of the Pentagon, which is just opposite of the Potomac River, as I just said.
We're looking at the White House, Mick, because we are learning that there have been some evacuations from the White House. I'm assuming that everyone is being evacuated from the Pentagon?
Well, nobody's given us the official word yet, but I think that's probably a safe bet. Thank goodness that was a helicopter that just flew by. I'm just a little nervous right now when you hear aircraft go past. But they have, in fact, evacuated that portion of the building. Usually they have sirens that go off in the building alerting you to the fact that it's time to get out. I haven't heard those yet, but just judging by the pictures, it's clear that that part of the building that is not damaged, at least, has been evacuated. Like I said, in the hallway, it was pandemonium. People were rushing from their offices, rushing outside.
And you're in your office at the Pentagon right now, Mick, reporting to us?
I am in the office, but I'm at the opposite side of where this crash occurred.
All right. Why don't you see if you can gather some more information? Please, again, be careful, Mick. And we're going to go to Matt, who's going to be talking with Jamie Gangel.
All right. Yeah. Katie, thank you very much. I'm joined by Tom Brokaw, and we'll try and recap what's been going on all morning here on the East Coast and in Washington, D.C. in just a few moments. But we do want to go right now to NBC's or today's national correspondent, Jamie Gangel, with some more information. Jamie?
Matt, I just want to tell you that U.S. intelligence sources are confirming the reports that one of the planes was a hijacked flight, an American flight from Boston to Los Angeles. They are also now looking into what's going on at the Pentagon. They don't have any details, but they have now put government buildings around the city of Washington on a heightened state of alert. I think part of that is happening formally, but obviously people are seeing what's going on, and some people are leaving buildings as well simply because of the concern following these latest reports from the Pentagon.
All right, Jamie, thank you very much. Again, joined by Tom Brokaw, and Katie's back with us now, too. Let's try and recap. It's 9:47 Eastern Time. Try and recap what's going on so far this morning, and the news is terrible. Just before 9 o'clock.
At 8:42, actually.
8:42, a plane crashed into the right-hand tower of the World Trade Center, somewhat about 3/4 of the way up. You can see the smoke billowing from that point of the building. And then about 18 or 20 minutes later, a second plane, a large plane, we saw it actually on tape, hit the left-hand tower of the World Trade Center about halfway up. An enormous fireball on several sides of the building. People trying to be evacuated. There's the tape of the second plane hitting right there, even as people were trying to get out of the first building. We have confirmed reports now that there was one plane hijacked, American Airlines Flight 11 from Boston to Los Angeles. And that is apparently one of the planes used in this crash, Tony.
Matt, there's a report on Dubai television that, in fact, the group claiming responsibility is the Democratic Front for the Liberation of Palestine. This comes, ironically, on a day when the Israeli Foreign Minister, Shimon Peres, is scheduled to meet with Yasser Arafat. Of course, we've had the meeting in South Africa for the past several days, in which the Palestinians were accusing the Israelis of racism. The United States vacated that meeting, but there hasn't been one specific incident.
And the Israelis vacated that meeting
as well.
And
the Israelis vacated it as well, but there has not been one specific incident. It's also worth pointing out that terrorism also always has two prongs to it, the physical threat and now the psychological threat. This does seem to be surreal, but in fact it is real when you have an explosion of undetermined origin at the Pentagon, the most conspicuous symbol of American capitalism, the Twin Trade Towers here in New York, two deliberate attacks on those towers today, and we do not know for sure who is responsible.
And the Capitol, by the way, the U.S. Capitol has been evacuated. There have been evacuations taking place at the White House. Needless to say, many people in the Pentagon have left that building as well.
Airports and here, by the way, in this building in Midtown New York, they have asked a lot of people at 30 Rockefeller Plaza to leave. It's another high-rise Capitol building, which is in New York. I came down the length of Manhattan, and a lot of people were simply unaware of what had happened as you tuned in the radio, and then they began to get it. It's election day here in New York.
Primary day.
And what we have is something that most Americans thought could never occur.
As Larry Johnson, a terrorist expert I just spoke with a few moments ago, the former deputy director of the State Department Office on Counterterrorism, claimed this is a first, that he had never heard or seen anything like it. He talked about back in 1993 a German plane being hijacked, and there were fears when it was flown to New York that it might be crashed into something.
Now, we have this as a major development. The Federal Aviation Administration has shut down all air traffic nationwide. This country has been immobilized by these terrorist attacks in terms of air travel today, and we don't know where it goes from here. We'll just ask that you stay with us so that as we get hard information, we can share that with you. There's going to be a lot of speculation. The president has described this apparently as a terrorist attack. The FBI has confirmed that an American Airlines flight, Boston to Los Angeles, was hijacked. It's believed that that was the first plane that went into the Twin Trade Towers.
Let's go to James Kallstrom, Tom, if we could, the former director of the FBI here in New York. Mr. Kallstrom, I'm sure you've never seen anything like this. Do you have any information that might be helpful to us?
Well, not particular information on this tragedy, but certainly what an incredible tragedy. And, you know, all of us in law enforcement and prior in law enforcement have talked for years, and the public has seen the hatred in the world. They've seen the bombing of the World Trade Center. They saw the conspiracy to blow up the tunnels in the United Nations and the FBI building back in the 90s. They've seen the bomb at the USS Cole and the bombings of our embassies in Africa. So, I mean, we've known for some time now that this hatred exists. And
And now it looks like that it's culminated in this absolutely horrendous, incredible act against the United States.
Jim, as someone who's
Washington today.
I'm sorry, as someone who's investigated some of these crimes in the past, and when we think back to 1993 and the World Trade Center bombing and what it took in terms of coordination and planning to pull off that one bomb in the World Trade Center, can you even speculate as to what it might take to coordinate this, what we think so far is a three-pronged attack this morning?
Matt, it obviously took a lot of coordination. There's a lot of groups in the world that have the ability to coordinate these types of attacks. As you know, and most people should know, the United States is an open society. I mean, we've talked for years about the downside of having our borders basically open. And any given day, people fly into our airports undocumented and turned into the population. They're not certainly all terrorism. They're not terrorists, but I mean, we live in a free society, and I'm not espousing we change that, but it's very, very difficult for the FBI and law enforcement to keep track of this when we live in the society that we live in.
Jim, if you can stand by for just a moment, because Jim Miklaszewski at the Pentagon has some more information for us. Mick?
Katie, my colleague Chris Brown here at the Pentagon encountered some of those who survived, whatever it was, whether it was a bomb or an airplane crashing into the Pentagon. One of the survivors who was reportedly injured, had various lacerations, was on the second floor of the D ring. That is one ring inside the outer ring of the Pentagon, when suddenly there was this horrific blast. And he said that the second floor buckled upward, and then the third floor above him actually collapsed downward. The scene on the other side of the building, as it's being described to us, there are people being removed on stretchers. Security forces are evacuating the building right now. And according to the officials here at the Pentagon, they still don't know exactly what it was, but as you reported, Katie, eyewitnesses reported that, in fact, it was a plane that crashed into the Pentagon.
And Mick, any idea, I wasn't quite sure if you said this, about the number of people who might have been hurt or worse in this?
No idea at all, Katie. As you know, having worked here on any given day, this is a small city, 25 to 30,000 people may be working here at any one time. That portion of the Pentagon, by the way, had just been remodeled and just reopened. If the crash had occurred just a few months ago, that section of the Pentagon would have been virtually empty. But at this time of day, early morning or mid-morning, the Pentagon's very busy. It's impossible to say how many casualties there may be. But there have been a large number of people cited being removed on stretchers. And again, as one survivor said, the floor just buckled up under him and the roof caved in on him.
All right, Mick, thank you very much. We want to move a couple of miles away from you right now to the White House, where Bob Kerr is standing by. And Bob, we understand that building has now been evacuated?
Matt, that's true. It is utterly surreal. As soon as word came of the Pentagon incident, we were rather forcefully removed from the White House. The scene was one of administrators, crooks, whatever, running at fairly high speed all the way out of the building through the top gates. Then we huddled for a while in Lafayette Park across the street, and we've been moved now from there a block or so away. The offices along Jackson Place, which are across the street from the White House and adjacent to Lafayette Park, also have been evacuated. And in the most surreal of this morning's scenes here at the White House, a white plane, a very big jet, was flying an unusual pattern near the White House over Lafayette Park very slowly. It made one circle, and then we have not seen it since. There was a lot of concern about what that plane might be, but again, it's only speculation, but most people say that since flights have been cleared from U.S. airspace and it was a totally white plane, looked unusual to all of us, that it was a government plane of some kind.
We should point out that we're looking at pictures, Bob, as you speak, of the World Trade Center because all of the camera crews have been evacuated from the White House as well. When do you expect President Bush to arrive there, Bob?
Well, Katie, he's coming back directly, and you figure it's about a 2-hour flight, so you can do the math. The reason I said that it was so surreal was that within just about 20 minutes ago, they were still conducting tours. You had hordes of tourists and others still in the White House on tour, lining up outside to get in. There seemed to be absolutely no unusual activity outside the White House until word came of the incident at the Pentagon. So it's been quite a dramatic shift here.
You know, in terms of responsibility, Tom and Matt and Bob, apparently a senior official from the Radical Democratic Front for the Liberation of Palestine denied on Tuesday the group had any connection to the plane crash. An anonymous caller had told television that it was behind the crash, but, quote, I emphasize that the story released on television by an anonymous person is totally incorrect. Tassir Khaled, a senior official from the DFLP Politburo in the Palestinian territories, told Reuters. The DFLP is against hijacking planes and against endangering the lives of civilians who are not connected with the struggle of this region, he said.
There are going to be a lot of claims and counterclaims in the course of the next 24 hours or so. This is a task for investigators of extraordinary magnitude to try to determine who did this and how they got away with it. You think about an American Airlines flight that was on its way from Boston to Los Angeles, was hijacked in midair. They're now citing transmissions from the plane, so they have hard evidence of that, and then brought down here and made to fly into the Twin Trade Towers. Did one of the hijackers get control? Did they shoot the pilot? It boggles the mind beyond our ability to figure out what was going on.
You talk about transmissions. I was just curious. Have you had any evidence of what was said during those
They're just saying they're citing transmission to know that the plane had been hijacked. That's all that they're saying about it at this point. We also ought to remind everyone, once again, this is an exceptional development. The FAA has banned all takeoffs at all airports across America. This country, in terms of air travel, has been immobilized. A good portion of the nation's capital, the most powerful center in the world, has been immobilized as well as a result of these terrorist
And that's
attacks.
a very haunting description that Bob Kerr just gave of that low-flying aircraft near the White House, and one can only wonder if that was something that ultimately ended up in the Pentagon.
We just saw a live picture of what seemed to be a portion of the building falling away from the World Trade Center. If we can re-rack that to about 20 seconds ago, you'll see something dramatic happening, and I don't know whether it's another explosion or a portion of the building falling away, but something major just happened at that building. Here we go to the tape.
We have the tape.
And watch what happens in the left-hand tower. I don't know if this is the correct tape. There, something there is about to happen, falling away right there.
Yeah, it looks like a big chunk of it has just peeled away.
One can only hope that the area has been evacuated, but of course you wonder about all the emergency vehicles and the people who might have been injured early in the morning.
Well, you remember when the bomb went off in the basement of it in 1993, how much damage was done throughout that building, how much chaos there was at that time. These are two coordinated airplane attacks on the building on the upper reaches of it. That will have an enormous structural effect. Those buildings, I think that it's fair to say, will probably have to be brought down. It's too early to speculate on that, but there's been that kind of damage.
Let's talk again. You were talking about
Here we have somebody
this
actually
is a reporter
on the scene.
here in New York from WNBC. You talk about the fact this plane was taken from Boston on the way to Los Angeles. The reports are that it was being diverted to JFK. And just for people who aren't familiar with the geography of this area, the southern tip of Manhattan would be very much near the flight, the landing pattern for JFK Airport. It could have been easy for a hijacker to pretend that he was taking that plane to JFK and veer off at the last minute.
Yeah, I heard one eyewitness say that over Washington Square, which is in the lower reaches of Manhattan, he saw a plane go over at about 1,000 feet, apparently the American Airlines flight, and then do what he described as a sharp right turn right toward the World Trade Center. He then lost sight of it.
And one eyewitness here in this AP report says he was getting off a PATH train to the World Trade Center and saw bodies falling out of the building. as he approached it. Police told him to get out of the building immediately. He ran outside and watched people jump out of the first building, and then there was a second explosion.
This footage we're seeing right now shows that the damage is so severe. I mean, we had seen what seemed to be two fairly self-contained impact craters before, and now it appears something much more dramatic has happened to at least one of those towers.
These pictures are beyond belief.
We have a report that the second plane may have flown out of Newark, New Jersey. This is an official who was speaking on the condition of anonymity. Again, there is no confirmation of that. We just know that there were two planes that went in. The first one apparently was an American Airlines flight that was from Boston to Los Angeles. We're now seeing it from the harbor view of this continuing damage and destruction to the World Trade Center.
Incidentally, Tom, I just want to interrupt you for 2 seconds because apparently Jamie Gangel has some more information for us. Jamie?
Spoken again to U.S. officials with access to the highest intelligence, and they are now confirming that it does appear that at the Pentagon it was a plane. Again, they are saying they believe now a third plane was involved at the Pentagon.
And of course, this has been the nightmare, Katie, for national security officials for a long time. We talk about nuclear bombs and those kinds of exchanges or invasions, but everyone has been terribly worried about the suitcase-sized bomb of some kind, or an airplane, or an attack on our subways in the large cities. And this, obviously, no one had anticipated. 3 airplanes that were deliberately aimed at critical targets in America. We can only hope that it's over for today, but officials are taking no chances on all that. They're evacuating all critical buildings because, as Mr. Johnson said earlier, this is an open society. James Kallstrom from the FBI also pointing out that almost anyone can come in here. They have access to so many instruments that can be used as instruments of attack and terrorism, and that certainly has been the case today.
Let's go to our State Department correspondent, Andrea Mitchell. Andrea, what can you tell us?
Well, this from the FBI. The State Department has been evacuated. There was a meeting going on in the Operations Center. Other top officials were in the Situation Room at the White House. Colin Powell is in Bogota, Colombia, on a 2-day trip. But this very interesting information, Katie, Matt, and Tom, from the FBI, they had been operating a massive exercise from their hostage rescue unit. All of their top teams, about 50 personnel, helicopters, equipment, were in Monterey, California for the last 2 days, scheduled to fly back today commercially. So all of those people are out of place. It's fair to say, according to sources that we've talked to here at NBC, that the FBI rescue operations and other FBI operations are really in chaos right now because they can't reach their officials in New York. All of their phone lines are down, and now you've got all of their special experts on this stuck in Monterey, California, trying to get a military flight back because there are no longer commercial flights. So they are seriously out of pocket, and there is a real breakdown of the FBI anti-terror coordination team, which is, of course, the principal team that would lead any effort and was so effective under Jim Kallstrom in New York City during the World Trade Center bombing and the TWA explosion, which, of course, turned out not to be terror.
Andrea, is the State Department taking this claim of responsibility from the Democratic Front for the Liberation of Palestine seriously? Are they giving any credence to that, or are they dismissing it, or how do they feel about who might have been responsible for this?
I think it is far too early for them, even the best experts in the government, to figure this out. They have one instant reaction, as you know, and it could be wrong, but their immediate reaction in a case like this would be to look toward Osama bin Laden and the collateral groups connected to him, simply because he has proved with the embassy bombings in Africa that he is the one terror leader who is capable of this kind of highly coordinated attack. The bombings went off in Tanzania and in Kenya almost simultaneously. It was extraordinarily well coordinated. They proved their case to a jury effectively and have managed to develop a great deal of information from sources, from in fact turning some former members of his network.
Andrea?
So they believe, Tom, that he is the most likely person, but it's far too early to say anything.
We want to tell you that American Airlines has confirmed that one of its flights, American Airlines flight number 11 from Boston's Logan Airport, scheduled to go to LAX. It left at 8 a.m. this morning. 45 minutes later, it was diverted into the World Trade Center. It was the airline that was involved. We can only assume on a popular flight like that it probably had a capacity load of passengers and crew on board. There was a hijacking. That was the first plane that was involved. We don't know about the second plane yet, nor do we know the origins of a third plane that deliberately flew itself into the Pentagon this morning near the heliport. NBC's Jim Miklashevsky now has been forced to evacuate that building, and so we'll have to wait till we hear from him.
Saw some pretty dramatic pictures from the Pentagon just moments ago, Matt.
Let's go back to a few seconds ago. This is now about an hour after the first impact. We saw some dramatic footage of a portion of one of the Twin Towers, actually it appearing to fall away from the rest of the building. Can we go to the tape now? Here we go, right here. This is, I mean, when you look at it, the building has collapsed. That tower just came down.
Let's go to Bob Bazell, who is at St. Vincent's Hospital. Bob, what's going on there? What can you tell us?
Katie, St. Vincent's Hospital is one of the hospitals that's closest to the World Trade Center. In the last few minutes, ambulances have been coming in one right after another. Most of the people they're bringing in have second and third degree burns, very serious burn victims. They say the smoke inhalation people will probably be the most serious, but they're not even close to getting to them yet. There's a triage operation that's going on in the area. Ambulances are being dispatched to every hospital in New York City. The entire staff of this hospital has come in from wherever they are, and it's true at hospitals across New York City. They're standing there. As soon as an ambulance pulls in, dozens of medical workers rush up to it. But it's a carnage that's just beginning. Everybody here, the emergency service workers I spoke to who have been down into the World Trade Center site, say this is just the tip of the iceberg. There's going to be massive amounts of casualties.
Bob, what are they telling you about people? Were there many people inside the building, or is it just too early to tell where the people were?
There were certainly, probably hundreds, even thousands of people in the building, even though it was before 9 o'clock on the start of the usual work period, because it's just such a large area. So the number of casualties is just enormous, and they're just beginning to sort it out and just starting to get to the first few that they can get to. But the ambulances are just coming in. They're lined up. Every ambulance in New York City has been summoned. They're standing in a queue. They go in as soon as they can get a victim and bring them up here right away.
Bob, we're also looking at the lower end of Manhattan now as a result of the collapse of one World Trade Center. That whole financial district is now engulfed in smoke and debris, and there probably is going to be a lot more smoke inhalation problems as a result of
what's almost certainly, Tom. I was actually standing and saw that collapse, and everybody here just gasped, and even the medical workers and the ambulance attendants, when they saw that people who are used to tragedy, grabbed each other and hugged each other, and some started to cry.
And of course, one wonders about the triage unit.
Exactly, we're close to the base of that building trying to evacuate people, and when a building of that size falls, it does not fall on its own footprint.
No, absolutely. I am, I'm several blocks north of there, so I don't know what that area looks like, but one can only imagine.
Well, the consequences go on, not just to the World Trade Center and to the poor people who were trapped and caught there, but of course that is the heart of the world financial markets, which have now been shut down effectively as well. So the ripple effect continues this morning as we all try to adjust psychologically and intellectually to what we are witnessing here. It is difficult to comprehend, but this country, the strongest country in the world, has been the target of a major coordinated terrorist attack. And the end is not over yet, even if it's confined to just these three targets. The ripple effect goes on. All air traffic has been shut down. There will be no financial markets in place today. Business has been stopped across the country.
And of course, who knows the human toll that will be the result of this action. Matt actually just pointed out to me on any given day, 50,000 people, Tom, work at the World Trade Center.
And at 8:45 in the morning, if they're not in the building, they're around the building. That's a beehive of activity down there. There is no more active area in terms of pedestrian traffic.
I hate to keep going back to the collapse of that tower, but if you consider that this plane hit at mid-structure and that would have probably taken out the electrical in the building where elevators wouldn't work and people struggling to get some way out of that tower, and it takes a long time to come down over 100 stories, and to think about the possible loss of life that just occurred by the collapse of that southeastern tower is just amazing. Minna Kathuria is with the Today Show, and she apparently saw the collapse of one of those towers. Minna?
Yes, hi, Matt.
Tell me what you saw.
Well, on the corner of Duane and West Broadway, walking down towards the Twin Towers, and it just collapsed. It looked like it looked sort of like the building just demolished. Smoke, clouds. I mean, clouds of smoke everywhere. People running towards me. I was going towards the Twin Towers. People were going away from the away from the towers, and it was just people running like I've never seen a scene like it.
Have you, from where you were, Minna, did you see many of the injured being treated? Is there any indication as the type of perimeter that the EMS people were dealing with?
No, I hadn't gotten that close yet. They were sort of blocking off the street. Now what they're doing is totally clearing out the area. And more emergency officials are coming in to help.
Can you just give me an idea of the reaction of people down there, Minna? Just pedestrians?
That's everyone in tears. People who were. I met some woman who was in the building to the right of where the first thing happened, and just all crying, wondering if the people that they know in the buildings next door are okay.
Jamie, Minna, thank you very much. Minna, take care of yourself. Jamie Gangel, our national correspondent, is on the phone now with some more information. Jamie?
Katie, as you well know, buildings around town are being evacuated. The State Department has been evacuated. The White House has been evacuated. And the Pentagon has been evacuated. Intelligence officials tell me that they do believe at the Pentagon that was a third plane going down. They have had, the intelligence sources that I've talked to say that they have not received any claim of responsibility yet.
Jamie, have you gotten any information from Reagan National Airport as to air traffic in the area this morning, or anybody who might have somehow traced this plane or figured out from where it came or where it was going?
They still do not have any of those details yet. It is almost impossible. They were confused for a long time as to whether it's a bomb or a plane. They say now that it appears to be a plane, but they say that is all the information that they have. As you know, the FAA has shut down all aircraft now, and they are now going back and trying to sort that out. But they do not have any information on that yet.
Do they know what type of plane it might have been?
There is no, unfortunately, they just don't have that yet.
All right, Jamie. Thank you very much, Jamie. We'll be talking with you.
It goes without saying this is the most serious attack in the United States in more than 100 years. Not since the War of 1812, and certainly the damage that we did to ourselves during the Civil War has this country suffered this kind of damage within its interior. Obviously, Pearl Harbor, which triggered World War II, was a horrific event as well, but there has never been an event to match the magnitude of this one, in which everything has been shut down in terms of air traffic. The national capital has been immobilized. The White House, State Department, Pentagon has been attacked. The financial markets have been shut down. There's an untold loss of life here in Manhattan, the nerve center of America, to say nothing of what's going on at the Pentagon.
When's the last time? I mean, this is a shot of New York City and downtown Manhattan that many people can't remember.
It looks
like a one tower.
It looks like a movie, frankly, that this is unfolding, and it combines the horror of the TWA Flight 800 bombing and the Murrah Federal Building, because it's both of these incidents, of course, coming together in the most horrific way.
By now, I would guess that everyone is up across all the time zones in America. It's 7:15 in the West, obviously, but for those of you who are just joining us at 8:45 Eastern Time, 8:42 Eastern Time today, an American Airlines flight, Flight 11 from Boston to LAX, was crashed into one of the World Trade Center buildings. 15 minutes later, another plane hit the other one. That building has now collapsed. Within an hour of those two attacks, the Pentagon was hit, now we're told, by a plane, an untold number of casualties there. President Bush has been on the air. He was in Florida at the time, saying apparently this was a terrorist attack. Everyone now believes that, carefully coordinated from the air, and the consequences of it in terms of human loss and the effect on this country are still to be determined.
We want to go now, Tom, to Kathleen Zichi, who's with NYU Downtown Hospital. They've been treating some of the injured. Kathleen, can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Can you tell me about the injuries you're seeing and the numbers of people you've been treating?
We've seen a steady stream of patients for approximately an hour and a half. Many appeared to be superficial injuries, but I can't tell you that I've seen the most serious ones because I believe they're going in through the ambulance bay. So we have a very high level of activity here Our first priority is on the care of those patients. And we do not have an exact tally at this time because of the level of activity at the hospital. We've also been responding to family members and friends who have come seeking information to the hospital.
And just quickly, Kathleen, how far is the hospital from the World Trade Center?
The hospital is perhaps a 5-minute walk from the World Trade Center, and we were the first responder when the Trade Center was attacked in '93, so unfortunately we have some prior experience.
Yeah. What kind of medical support is there downtown? How many hospitals in the immediate area there that could help with the injured?
We are the only hospital south of 13th Street in New York City, so we serve a very large proportion of the city. For that reason, our emergency room is a very high priority of this hospital, and the staff have been doing a heroic job in terms of responding to the patients.
Kathleen, what about the triage unit that is on the ground there? Are they NYU, a team of NYU medical people on the scene as well?
Yes, there are. I cannot respond to that question because I am not on the scene, and I don't have that information.
But you do have medical people, your personnel there at the scene?
That is my understanding, yes.
Katie, what we're worried about now is that the other building may come down. They've obviously evacuated that whole area as a result of the crash of one World Trade Center. Now I'm told that there's concern about the second one collapsing as well. Plainly, there's been an enormous amount of structural damage in the upper floors of all of that. And it is more than 100 stories high. It wouldn't take much to bring it down.
Kathleen, thank you very much. We appreciate it.
Thank you.
We're told now that a spokesman for Yasser Arafat, the leader of the Palestinian, the leader of the PLA, the Palestinian Liberation Organization, that he has, that Arafat has condemned what has happened here in New York. He says that the PLO has no role in it whatsoever. They're completely shocked and appalled by what is happening. There was just one earlier report that the Radical Democratic Front for the Liberation of Palestine claimed responsibility, but that was later denied as well. We don't know yet who is in fact responsible for this, but it was very carefully planned and coordinated, and fair to say it has been a devastatingly efficient and effective attack on the heart of this country.
And Pat Dawson is on the ground near the World Trade Center. Pat, are you there? Pat Dawson, can you hear me?
Apparently.
Okay, he's having some audio problems. We'll get to Pat in just a moment.
Just amazing. You have to stop and think about, the hijacked plane and the terror of the passengers on board. As it could have been up to an hour that they realized something was dramatically wrong with this flight, and then thinking that perhaps they were going to John F. Kennedy Airport here in Queens, actually, and the plane suddenly veering into the World Trade Center tower.
No, you can only imagine.
What is striking to me is that we didn't have any early report of the the hijacking. A lot of people monitor that air traffic talk that goes on, and it wasn't until this happened.
Well, the plane left Boston at 8 o'clock this
45
morning.
minutes later.
So it was about 42 minutes later that this occurred.
And it flew right over lower Manhattan. A number of people saw it at a very low altitude and then take this sharp right turn and wondered, according to eyewitnesses, what in the world was going on. Moments later, of course, the World Trade Center was hit. It was about an hour after that Jim Miklashevsky told you, Katie, that he'd felt an explosion at the Pentagon, and now we learn that there has been a plane that's been flown into the Pentagon. There have been people who have been hurt there, and we hope no one has been killed, but it seems likely that there were probably casualties of a serious magnitude there as well. The White House has been evacuated. The State Department is being evacuated.
Here's the Pentagon.
Here's the Pentagon now.
Pat Dawson, apparently, let's just take a quick look at the Pentagon, and as you can see, smoke continues to billow out of that structure. As Tom just mentioned, it's unclear how many people were hurt, and if in fact it was a plane. There is speculation that they believe it was a plane. Let's go to Pat Dawson, who is down by the World Trade Center. Pat, can you hear me?
Right down here, we cannot tell you much more in terms of specific information other than to say that there are probably at this stage, I would say, hundreds, perhaps in the thousands of emergency workers who in the last hour and a half have managed to work their way down here to lower Manhattan and basically try to get into this fray. We are standing right here about 10 to 12 blocks north of the World Trade Center. These firemen that you can see, firefighters are walking down towards the site now, and they literally have been arriving by the dozens over the past hour or so. As we say, probably in excess of 1,000 or more emergency workers from New York City and surrounding areas converging on this site now to try to make some sense of it. As you can imagine, at this point, there is a certain level of chaos because they're just trying to sort out who's alive, who's not. We did speak to, as I said before, some of the emergency workers. They are police officers from the Port Authority of New York and New Jersey. That is the organization that has jurisdiction over those two buildings specifically, as well as bridges and tunnels. I spoke to two of them who were actually down there when that building collapsed. They said that they speculate that the loss of life had to be horrific, that there were not that many people down there on the streets at that point, that most of them who had been evacuated, that is civilians. But on the other hand, they said that there were literally hundreds of emergency workers who were down at that end. They have no idea the level of loss of life at this point. When I asked one of them why he was going back in as he suited up since he could barely breathe, he said, "It's my job, and there may be some of my brother officers in there. There may be other people in there." So those officers going in here, as you can see, all kinds of fire workers going in there, literally in the thousands now converging on this site. We cannot give you much of an organizational sense beyond telling you probably what you already know, which is that two separate aircraft have struck the two towers of the World Trade Center. If memory serves, I think each of those towers stands 110 stories. Some of the dust, as you can probably see now, is blowing in our faces. It just really depends on which way the wind blows as to whether or not we're enveloped in some of the dust and the smoke. As you can see from these pictures, the amount of dust from the fire that's still burning, flames and ash, is extraordinary at this point. And at least a few emergency workers have said that they really aren't so sure that other tower won't stay up now. They really didn't think the first one was capable of coming down, but it did. And so they're basically saying, keep back as far as you can. On the other hand, facing that danger, as we have been telling you, many, many hundreds of these workers are heading over those lines down towards that burning building to try to rescue those people who are in there, be they emergency workers, be they civilians. The original crash took place just about 8:45 by my reckoning. I don't know the exact time, but about 8:45. And when that took place, obviously at that hour the building would not be packed with people, but it's still late enough in the morning that there would be enough people.
We were listening to Pat Dawson, who's standing near the World Trade Center in Lower Manhattan. And Katie and Tom, I was thinking while Pat was talking, you both spent some time out at Oklahoma City at the Murrah Federal Building after that explosion. It took more than a week to sift through that rubble of a building that was how many stories? Probably...
It was about 30 stories, as I remember.
I'm sorry to interrupt you both, but apparently we've gotten a report that now a car bomb has exploded outside the State Department. Again, that's an initial report that I'm hearing from our producers in the control room. Can we go to anyone for more information on that? Apparently, no more information on that.
Where is Andrea Mitchell? Is she at the State Department?
Well, the State Department has been evacuated, as well as the White House. The U.S. Capitol has been evacuated. Obviously, the Pentagon has as well. We'll go to Mick. Mick, what is the latest from the Pentagon?
Katie, security officials here at the Pentagon have not only evacuated the building, but they're clearing the entire area. Security forces have reported that they have received information of another plane hijacking, that it's about 20 to 25 miles out of Washington, D.C., headed in this general direction. Secretary of Defense Donald Rumsfeld, a few moments ago, was refusing to leave the building. We ran into the chief naval officer, the top naval officer, Admiral Vern Clark. They were loading him quickly into a car to take him to an alternative command site. Do you have me? They were taking Admiral Clark to an alternative command site. Hello, do you hear me?
Yes, we can, Mick. Go ahead.
Okay, I'm sorry. There's no confirmation of this latest threat, but security officials here are taking it very seriously. We were standing with Secretary Rumsfeld's security detail, who, as soon as they got the report, went running into the building, and we were herded away. But they have set up an alternative command site somewhere in the area. The Pentagon has set up a crisis team to deal with this situation. But so far, the latest reports are that another plane of some kind may have been hijacked and headed in this direction. Katie?
Yeah, we also should tell you, Mick, this is Tom Brokaw, that the FAA now says that all international flights headed for the United States are being diverted to Canada. This at a time when, as Jim Miklashevsky is telling us, there's an unconfirmed report that there's been another hijacking. All takeoffs were stopped, but there were planes in the air, obviously, at the time of these first two attacks on the Twin Trade Towers and then on the Pentagon.
Andrea Mitchell is standing by with more information. She was at the State Department. Andrea?
The State Department, as you know, has been evacuated. Secretary of State Colin Powell is now en route home from Lima, Peru. He did not get to his destination of Bogota, Colombia today, so that trip canceled. He, as all other officials, heading back. State Department officials and the White House officials and the NSC have all been evacuated as well, although Condi Rice was earlier in the Situation Room. And CIA Director George Tenet has been holding meetings in his office in Langley, Virginia. And as we reported earlier, key FBI team members from their rescue efforts and anti-terror coordinating team were stranded in Monterey, California, where they were on a secret military exercise against exactly this kind of event.
Andrea, let me interrupt for a second. Can you tell us any more about reports we're getting that a car bomb has exploded outside the State Department?
I do not have confirmation of that.
All right.
They did evacuate the State Department, but we do not have confirmation at this moment about a car bomb outside the State Department. You know,
Andrea, thanks. I'm sorry to interrupt, but we're going to go back to Jim Miklashevsky at the Pentagon. Mick?
I've got my eyes peeled here, Katie. I don't see anything, but security forces in the area have just blared out over their loudspeakers to any pedestrians who are anywhere near the Pentagon to take cover immediately. There was, as I said earlier, an indication that another plane may have been hijacked and headed in this general direction. So far, all we see are security helicopters circling the Pentagon. Again, the skies are crystal clear blue, and I can't see the speck of an airplane, but security forces here are obviously alarmed enough not only to tell people to keep some distance from the building, but to take immediate cover.
Can you tell me a little bit more? Well, actually, let's look at these live pictures at the World Trade Center. The other tower of the World Trade Center has just collapsed. You are looking at live pictures of the second Twin Tower at the World Trade Center collapsing as a result of the crash of an airplane into its side. That, I believe, was the first tower that was struck this morning at 8:42 Eastern Time.
You're not there.
That is now...
No.
Fallen to the ground and collapsed.
The profile of Manhattan has been changed. There's been a declaration of war by terrorists on the United States. There's nothing short of that.
Pat Dawson, excuse me, Tom, is down at the scene. Pat?
Where's Wing? Where's Wing? Where's Wing?
Pat, can you hear us? Obviously, there is pandemonium downtown. Pat is not far from the World Trade Center, as you can hear from the sirens, and you can only imagine the confusion and the terror that is in that area after not one but both Trade Center towers have now collapsed.
More than 100 stories of steel, concrete, electrical. Here it is. That's a videotape replay.